I stood in the kitchen I had spent 2 years rebuilding with my own hands and life savings, staring at the $1,000 check my mother just tossed onto the marble island. She smiled over her coffee cup and announced they had secretly sold the house for triple its value, planning to use my unpaid labor to buy her golden child son a luxury penthouse. My father did not even look up from his newspaper, as my entire future was auctioned off to fund my brother's lifestyle. What they did not know was that as a licensed commercial construction project manager, I legally documented every single hour of labor, bag of concrete, and sheet of drywall billed to my own corporate entity. By trying to cash out on my sweat, they had just walked blindfolded into an airtight property lien that would freeze their $1 million transaction dead in its tracks. My name is Maya. I am 31 years old, and I run commercial building sites for a living. Before I continue this story, drop a comment with your age, your local time, and where you are watching from. Hit like and subscribe to Sweet Life Drama if you have ever been treated like a disposable workhorse by your own blood. You will want to hear exactly how I locked down their stolen payday and watch their perfect facade crumble. Now let me take you back to the exact second that $1,000 check fluttered onto the countertop. The room still smelled of fresh primer and lemon oil. My knees ached from installing the custom herringbone floor they were currently standing on. Susan, my mother, adjusted her silk scarf. She looked at the check, then at my dust-covered work pants, as if waiting for me to express gratitude. David, my father, finally lowered the sports section. He offered a tight, practiced smile. "It is a fair day rate for a hobby project, Maya. The buyers love the modern finishes. We close in 3 days." Before I could form a response, the front door swung open. Heavy footsteps echoed through the hallway, followed by the sharp click of designer heels. My older brother Chase strolled into the kitchen, spinning a silver Porsche keychain around his index finger. Behind him was his wife, Jasmine. Her dark skin was glowing. Her flawless box braids swept over one shoulder of a tailored cashmere trench coat. She looked like she belonged on the cover of a lifestyle magazine. I looked like a contractor who had just pulled a 12-hour shift. Jasmine wrinkled her nose at the faint smell of mineral spirits lingering in the air. She sidestepped a stray drop cloth, careful not to let her red-bottom stilettos touch the raw canvas. "It looks decent in here," Jasmine said. She trailed a manicured fingernail along the edge of the island I had installed at midnight 2 weeks ago. "Chase and I just put the deposit down on the downtown loft. Your parents are wiring the house sale profits on Friday to cover the rest. We really needed this." Chase grinned, leaning against the custom cabinetry. "Yeah, Maya, you know how it is. I am starting that new consulting gig soon. We need the right address to host clients. You are single, no kids. You do not need a 4-bedroom house anyway." Susan patted Chase's arm, her eyes shining with blind devotion. "Your brother is building a legacy, Maya. You should be proud to help your family." I looked at my mother. Then I looked at the $1,000 check resting on the pristine quartz. 2 years of my life, 104 weekends. My personal savings drained to zero because David promised this property would be transferred to my name. A sharp metallic taste flooded my mouth. I was biting the inside of my cheek, a biological locking mechanism to force compliance and hold back the scream trying to rip its way past my throat. My jaw muscles clenched so tight the hinge ached, a dull throb starting at my temples. I did not yell. I did not cry. Tears demand a sympathetic audience, and the room was empty of one. I picked up the check. I clamped my thumb down hard, feeling the crisp edge of the bank stock dig deep into the soft tissue of my finger, anchoring me to reality so I would not snap. I tore it straight down the middle. Then I stacked the halves and tore them again. I dropped the 4 pieces back onto the counter. The pieces scattered across the smooth surface. Jasmine gasped, her hand flying to her chest. Chase pushed off the cabinets, his grin vanishing. "What is your problem?" he snapped. I turned my back to them. I walked out the front door, leaving the heavy oak frame to click shut behind me. The crisp morning air hit my face. I unlocked my work truck, climbed into the cab, and started the engine. The diesel motor hummed. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number for my corporate legal counsel. He answered on the second ring. "Marcus," I said, my voice steady, stripped of any familial warmth. Pull the master ledger for the Willow Street renovation. Every invoice, every labor hour. Draft a mechanic's lien for the total amount.
They did not pay you?
Marcus asked. They sold it. Closing is Friday. Keys tapped rapidly on the other end of the line. I will file the lien with the county recorder before noon today. They will not be able to transfer a single blade of grass. I shifted the truck into drive. Freeze it all! The tires of my truck hit the asphalt of Willow Street. I did not look back at the house. My hands gripped the steering wheel. White dust from the drywall still coated my knuckles. My right shoulder throbbed. A dull, persistent ache from hanging overhead cabinets for 14 hours straight the previous weekend. The heater kicked on, blowing warm air against my face, but the chill in my chest remained. 104 weekends. That was the exact cost of my loyalty. I navigated through the neighborhood, passing manicured lawns and quiet driveways. The silence inside the cab gave my brain space to process the betrayal. To understand how a family executes a robbery in broad daylight, you have to look at the foundation they poured. The deception did not start this morning with the $1,000 check. It started 2 years ago, in a dining room smelling of pot roast and false promises. 24 months earlier, the Willow Street property was a decaying shell. The roof sagged, black mold climbed the basement walls. The original hardwood was buried under layers of rotting carpet. David and Susan had purchased it as an investment during a market dip, but they lacked the capital and the competence to fix it. They invited me to dinner. David poured me a glass of wine, the expensive kind he usually saved for impressing bank managers. He slid a folder across the table, the blueprints. "We are drowning on this property, Maya," David said. His voice carried that manufactured vulnerability he perfected over the years. "Contractors are quoting us 6 figures just to make it livable. We cannot afford it." Susan reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. "This house is the family legacy. We want to keep it in the family. Chase is not built for this kind of work. But you run commercial sites. You know how to build things." I looked at the blueprints. I saw the potential. I also saw the trap, but I chose to ignore the warning signs. "If I take this on," I said, "it requires serious capital. Permits, materials, licensed electricians." David nodded solemnly. "We will cover the base costs, but your labor, your expertise, that is your investment. When it is finished, we will transfer the deed to your name. This will be your home, Maya." A handshake, a promise from a father. I believed him. But my corporate training dictated a baseline of protection. The next morning, I handed David a stack of standard municipal permit applications. Tucked beneath the city forms was a notice of furnishing. It is a mandatory state document preserving a commercial contractor's right to file a lien if unpaid. David signed the bottom line in blue ink without reading a single paragraph. He assumed it was just bureaucracy. I assumed it was insurance. I transferred $45,000 from my high-yield savings account to a dedicated project fund. It was the money I had saved for my own down payment. I spent it on copper piping, structural beams, and premium insulation for a house I did not legally own yet. The reality of the arrangement surfaced quickly. The base costs David promised to cover evaporated within the first month. Every time I submitted a receipt for concrete or roofing shingles, the excuses multiplied. "The stock market took a hit this quarter," David would say, refusing to meet my eyes. "Can you float this batch? We will reimburse you." The reimbursement never arrived. Instead, the manipulation evolved. When I worked a 50-hour week at my corporate firm and spent Saturday morning pulling down lath and plaster, my mother would drop by with a single, lukewarm coffee. "You are doing such a beautiful job," Susan would coo, stepping carefully to avoid the debris. "Your contribution is love, Maya. This house represents our family bond." Love does not pay for fiberglass bats. Love does not cover the cost of a rented dumpster. I paid for it all. I woke up at 5 in the morning every Saturday and Sunday. The brutal cold of Ohio winters seeped through the soles of my work boots. The scream of the circular saw became the soundtrack of my weekends. I hung drywall until my fingers blistered. I laid tile until my knees bruised. I breathed in sawdust and exhaust while my family lived comfortably across town. I kept my head down because of the promise, the deed. The house would be mine. That was the anchor holding me in place. But an anchor is just a heavy weight if the ship is already sinking. The bitter irony of my exhaustion was watching how my brother lived. Chase was the textbook definition of a golden child. He carried an inflated sense of importance and a resume full of 6-month stints at startups that inevitably failed. While I was bleeding my savings dry, Chase was treating our parents like a limitless ATM. One rainy Tuesday, I was on my hands and knees in the Willow Street kitchen, leveling the subfloor. The front door opened. Chase walked in, followed by Jasmine. Jasmine styled herself as a digital content creator. She wore pristine white designer sneakers and a beige cashmere sweater. Her melanin popped flawlessly against the harsh construction lights, her dark box braids trailing elegantly down her back. She held her phone out, recording the room. "Look at this mess," Jasmine said to her camera, laughing. "We are touring the new family project. It is giving major demolition vibes." She aimed the lens at me. I was covered in gray dust, holding a trowel. I glared at the phone until she lowered it. Chase leaned against the load-bearing stud I had installed. "Dad said you were making progress. Looks like a war zone." "It is a construction site, Chase," I said. "Do not touch the wet cement." He smirked and checked his luxury watch. "Right. Well, we are just stopping by before our flight. We are heading to Tulum for a week." I stopped spreading the leveling compound. "Tulum? I thought you quit your consulting job last week." "I am pivoting," Chase said smoothly. "Dad gave us an early anniversary gift to help us decompress. Stress is toxic for Jasmine's creative process." David had funded a luxury vacation for his unemployed son while telling me he could not afford $200 for electrical wire. The hypocrisy was a physical blow. I watched Jasmine adjust her diamond stud earrings. She complained about the dust ruining her pedicure. Then they left, climbing into a brand new SUV David had co-signed for them. After their brand new SUV pulled out of the driveway, I ate a cold turkey sandwich on an overturned paint bucket. My bank account was bleeding out, and I had become a ghost in my own family, useful only for the manual labor I provided. I swallowed the physical pain and the resentment, anchoring my sanity to the promised deed. But my family confused my silence with stupidity. They built their comfortable lives on the arrogant assumption that I lacked the spine to demand what was mine. That assumption was a fatal error. The pressure cooker was sealed, and the explosion was exactly 1 month away. 1 month before the $1,000 check landed on the marble island, the cracks in the foundation began to show. I arrived at the site early on a Saturday and immediately noticed something wrong. A commercial contractor knows when an unauthorized body walks their site. The thin layer of fine white drywall dust coating the entryway floor had been disturbed. 2 sets of footprints. One belonged to Susan's distinct designer flats. The other was a man's dress shoe, a smooth leather sole, not a lugged work boot. I followed the tracks. They stopped at the island, pivoted toward the master bedroom, and ended right where I was installing the custom cabinetry. I was kneeling on the unfinished kitchen floor, tracking the dress shoe prints. I shined my tactical flashlight into the narrow gap beneath the built-in oven. A flash of white caught the beam. Susan must have dropped it and kicked it under the cabinet in a panic to hide it. I reached into the crevice and pulled it out. It was a business card. Heavy, high-gloss cardstock with raised gold lettering. Gregory Sterling, Certified Property Appraiser. I flipped it over. Susan's handwriting was scribbled on the back. Estimated market value, 1.2. Dated just 2 days prior. A Tuesday. A day I was sitting in my corporate office downtown, running logistics for a commercial build. My parents had brought a stranger into the house to evaluate my sweat equity while I was away earning my actual paycheck. I stood up, wiping the dust from my jeans. I walked straight out the back door, carrying the card.
I found Susan in the backyard. She wore a wide-brimmed woven sun hat and pristine gardening gloves, clipping dead roses from the trellis with surgical shears. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawn. I held the card up. "An appraiser," I said, keeping my tone flat. "Why is an appraiser walking through a house under active construction?" Susan did not flinch. She did not drop the shears. Her breathing maintained a steady, unbothered rhythm. She snipped another thorny stem, inspected the bloom, and placed it carefully into her woven basket. "We are refinancing," she said smoothly, keeping her eyes on the rosebush. "Your brother and Jasmine need a small business loan. Jasmine is launching an online luxury lifestyle boutique. The bank requires updated collateral to secure the funding." I watched my mother's face, the utter lack of tension in her jaw, the calculated focus on her gardening task. Liars usually fidget, but my mother treated deception like a routine domestic chore. "A business loan," I repeated. "Using the house you explicitly promised to sign over to me." Susan finally turned around. She offered a tight, practiced smile that did not reach her eyes. "It is just standard bank paperwork, Maya. You will still get the deed eventually. We have to support Chase right now. You know how unforgiving the job market is for a young man with his visionary ideas." She turned her back to me and walked toward the patio. The conversation was terminated. I did not go back inside to cut wood. I walked to my truck, climbed into the cab, and locked the doors. I dialed Chloe. Chloe handled commercial acquisitions for a rival development firm downtown, but she kept her real estate credentials active in the residential market. She picked up on the second ring. "Run a search on the Willow Street address," I told her. "Check the off-market networks, pocket listings, whispers. Pull every record you can access." "Give me a second," Chloe said. I heard the rapid, rhythmic clatter of her mechanical keyboard. The diesel engine of my truck hummed beneath me. 3 minutes passed in heavy silence. Then the typing stopped. "Maya?" Chloe said. Her voice dropped an octave, shifting from casual to grave. "It is listed. Private agent network, cash buyers only. $1.2 million. My grip on the steering wheel tightened until my knuckles turned white. "Send it to me." A digital brochure arrived in my inbox seconds later. I opened the PDF on my phone screen. High-resolution, professionally lit photographs displayed the living room I had gutted with my own 2 hands. The brochure showcased the exposed brick fireplace I had painstakingly restored, scrubbing a century of black soot with wire brushes until my fingers bled. The marketing copy praised the artisanal craftsmanship and turnkey modern luxury. The listing agent specifically noted the property would be ready for final buyer walkthroughs in exactly 30 days. My family was actively packaging my sweat equity to sell to the highest bidder while I was still swinging the hammer inside the walls. The true depth of their cruelty arrived the following morning. My phone vibrated loudly against the nightstand at 5:30. The caller ID flashed David's name. I answered in the dark, the room still freezing. "Maya," my father said. His voice sounded bright, energized, dripping with false camaraderie. "I need you to push hard this weekend. That premium white oak flooring needs to be laid down in the master suite by Sunday night." I stared at the ceiling shadows. "Why the rush?" I asked. "Your mother has some important guests coming from out of town next week." He lied effortlessly. "We want to host them at the property, show them what a beautiful job you are doing. We need the master suite looking flawless." He wanted me to stage the crime scene. He wanted my aching joints and blistered hands to polish the very asset he was actively stealing from me. The important guests were the cash buyers. The rush deadline was the escrow schedule. I lay in bed, listening to the faint static of his breathing through the speaker. A dutiful daughter would have confronted him right there. She would have screamed, demanded the truth, and begged for the parental loyalty he was entirely incapable of giving. But the corporate project manager inside me took the wheel. "Okay, Dad," I said. "I will get the oak finished." I hung up the phone. That short, mundane conversation severed the final thread of my familial obligation. You cannot betray people who have already marked you as a disposable casualty on their balance sheet.
The incident freed me from the burden of being a good sister and a respectful daughter. They assumed my quiet compliance was sheer ignorance. They believed I was a blind pack animal, content to pull the heavy cart as long as they offered a few hollow words of praise. I drove to the hardware store that morning as the sun breached the horizon. I bought the flooring cleats. I bought the heavy-duty underlayment. I paid the cashier with my personal business credit card, requested a detailed itemized receipt, and filed the paper in the thick leather binder sitting on my passenger seat. I spent the next 3 weeks working faster, harder, and with lethal precision. I laid the white oak planks. I grouted the subway tile in the master bathroom. I installed the heavy brushed brass fixtures. Every strike of the rubber mallet drove another nail into their false narrative. Jasmine came by one afternoon to inspect the progress. She strolled into the newly finished bathroom wearing suede ankle boots, holding her phone high to record a video for her followers. She adjusted her designer sunglasses in the vanity mirror I had hung the night before. "It is taking forever, Maya," Jasmine complained, waving a manicured hand at a small pile of sawdust. "Chase and I need to start shopping for furniture. We cannot have these delays." I did not argue. I grabbed a damp cloth, wiped down the quartz counter, and watched her reflection in the glass. "It will be ready," I told her. I cataloged every hour of that interaction. I photographed every finished room from multiple angles. I logged every material cost, every delivery fee, and every minute of my skilled labor into my corporate accounting software. The rotting house transformed into a modern masterpiece, and my daily ledger transformed into a loaded weapon. My parents thought they were 30 days away from a 7-figure, effortless payday. They thought they were handing Chase the keys to a luxury life funded entirely by my exhaustion. But a legal contract does not care about family dinners. A commercial ledger does not recognize bloodlines. They invited me to the property to build their fortune, and I accepted the invitation. I secured the final baseboards. I swept the oak floors clean. I locked the front door on my way out, fully aware that the next time they tried to open it, the keys would be useless. The drive from the residential quiet of Willow Street to the downtown commercial district took exactly 22 minutes. I did not turn on the radio. I listened to the steady hum of my truck tires against the pavement. The heater slowly thawed the lingering chill in my hands. The white drywall dust on my jeans served as the only remaining evidence of the morning I had just walked away from. I pulled into the underground parking garage of a steel and glass high-rise. My truck sat heavy and out of place among the sleek sedans and imported sports cars. I guided it into a reserved spot near the elevator bank. A small metal placard on the concrete wall read, "Director of Commercial Development." I swiped my security badge at the glass turnstiles. The lobby guard offered a polite nod. I stepped onto the elevator and pressed the button for the 14th floor. My family operated under a convenient delusion. They treated my career as a cute hobby. They liked to tell their friends I worked in construction, painting a picture of a tomboy daughter swinging a hammer on weekends. They never bothered to understand the scale of my actual profession. I did not just swing hammers. I managed multi-million-dollar commercial builds. I held a state-issued general contractor license. I employed architects, structural engineers, and site foremen. My signature authorized corporate expenditures that dwarfed my father's entire retirement account. I walked onto my floor. The air conditioning hummed an even, sterile note. Telephones rang in the distance. Junior project managers moved between cubicles with rolled blueprints. A few of them glanced at my dust-covered boots, but nobody asked questions. They knew better. I pushed open the heavy glass door to my corner office and dropped my keys onto the mahogany desk. Marcus was already sitting in the leather guest chair. He had my master ledger open on his lap. Beside him sat a thick stack of legal paper, fresh from a printer, the pages still warm. "You made good time," Marcus said. He did not look up from the numbers. His pen traced down a long column of itemized expenses. "The traffic was light," I replied. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window. The city sprawled out below, a grid of concrete and ambition.
Do you have the final tally? Marcus flipped to the last page of the ledger. I ran the numbers 3 times to ensure 0 discrepancies. Every receipt you submitted over the last 24 months, the raw materials,
The imported white oak, the custom cabinetry, the commercial-grade electrical rewiring, the plumbing overhauls. We factored in the standard industry rate for your labor hours, calculated at your licensed professional tier, not a freelance discount. He closed the ledger and set it flat on my desk. He folded his hands over the leather cover. $185,420, he said. I turned away from the window. That number represented missed holidays, canceled dates, and exhausted evenings. It represented the physical toll on my joints and the depletion of my personal savings. It was the exact price of my family's greed. Draft the lien, I said. It is already drafted, Marcus replied. He slid the stack of legal paper across the mahogany surface. I need you to understand the mechanics of what happens when you sign this. A mechanic's lien is not a suggestion. It is a hard legal claim against the physical property. Under state real estate law, any licensed contractor who improves a property and is denied payment has the right to encumber that property. You are claiming unjust enrichment. I picked up the heavy black pen resting beside my keyboard. Explain the escrow impact. Your father accepted a cash offer, Marcus said, his tone shifting into clinical legal analysis. Cash buyers rely on title insurance to guarantee the property is free and clear of debts. Title companies run a comprehensive public record search before issuing that policy. When the county recorder logs this lien, it creates a cloud on the title, a dark, immovable cloud. No title company in the country will insure a property with an active figure mechanics lien. Without title insurance, the buyer cannot close. The transaction freezes instantly. Can they bypass it? I asked. Only 2 ways out, Marcus stated. They pay you the $185,000 in full from their own pockets to clear the debt, or they take you to court to contest the lien. A court battle takes months, sometimes years. Their buyer will walk away long before a judge even sets a hearing date. Their payday dies today. I looked down at the document. The legal phrasing was dense, sharp, and unforgiving. It listed David and Susan as the property owners. It listed my corporate entity as the claimant. It was a flawless, airtight trap. I pressed the pen to the signature line. The ink flowed smooth and black. I signed my full legal name. I did not hesitate. I did not feel a sudden rush of guilt. You cannot feel guilty for locking a door after someone has already robbed you. Marcus gestured to my administrative assistant, Elena, who had been waiting quietly by the door. She carried a heavy brass notary seal. She verified my signature, signed her own name, and pressed the metal seal into the bottom corner of the page. The loud metallic crunch echoed in the quiet office. The document was now a sworn legal instrument. Take this directly to the county recorder's office, Marcus told Elena, handing her the manila envelope. Do not use the mailroom. Hand deliver it to the clerk. Get a time-stamped receipt. Elena nodded, grabbed her coat, and walked out. The clock started ticking. I sat down in my leather chair. My muscles ached. The adrenaline from the morning confrontation was beginning to fade, leaving a cold, sharp focus in its place. I opened my laptop and began reviewing unread emails for my current commercial projects. I needed to work. I needed the routine of my actual life to wash away the stench of the Willow Street house. My phone vibrated on the desk. I ignored it. It vibrated again, then a third time. I picked up the device. The screen illuminated with a cascade of notifications. My family was trying to manage the narrative. They still thought they held the high ground. They thought my departure from the kitchen was a temporary tantrum, a brief flare of emotion that would burn out by evening. The first text was from Chase. You need to grow up, Maya. Tearing up a check is childish. Mom is crying because you ruined the vibe this morning. We are family. Stop acting like a contractor and start acting like a sister. Jasmine is stressed out now, and it is bad for her energy. I read the words twice. He was worried about his wife's energy while actively planning to buy a luxury penthouse with my stolen wages.
The entitlement was so thick it practically suffocated the screen. The second text was from David. I am disappointed in your behavior today. We offered you fair compensation for a side project. You walked out on your mother. I expect you to call her and apologize before the end of the day. We have the final walkthrough with the buyers tomorrow and closing on Friday. Do not cause any more drama. He demanded an apology. He wanted me to beg for forgiveness after he auctioned off my future. The audacity was almost impressive. He felt entirely secure in his position of power.
I did not type a response. I swiped the notifications away. 30 minutes later, Elena returned to the office. She walked up to my desk and placed a small yellow carbon copy receipt next to my keyboard. Filed and recorded, Elena said. The clerk stamped it at 11:14. I looked at the red ink of the timestamp. The lien was live. The property was encumbered. The invisible chain around the Willow Street house had just pulled tight, anchoring it to the ground. My parents were currently walking around town, picking out furniture, completely unaware that their bank accounts were already bleeding out. My phone vibrated one more time, a new message from Susan. Maya, we are having a celebration dinner tomorrow night at Le Petit Bistro, 8 p.m. We are toasting the house sale in Chase's new apartment. Please wear something nice and leave the attitude at home. We want to be a whole family again. A celebration dinner, the night before the scheduled closing. They wanted me to sit at a table with expensive wine and watch them feast on the carcass of my hard work. A year ago, I would have made an excuse. I would have stayed home and cried. I picked up the phone. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I stared at the screen, feeling the cold, satisfying weight of the yellow receipt resting on my desk. I will be there. I typed. I hit send. I set the phone down and turned my attention back to my monitors. The trap was armed. The prey had invited me to dinner. I intended to have a front row seat when the jaws snapped shut. The heavy mahogany doors of Le Petit Bistro muted the street noise the second I stepped inside. Warm amber light spilled across the dining room. The scent of roasted garlic and expensive truffle oil hung heavy in the air. The hostess guided me toward a semi-private alcove draped in thick velvet curtains. My family was already seated at a wide circular table covered in crisp white linen. They looked like a curated advertisement for generational wealth. Susan wore a tailored navy blouse and a new string of pearls. David leaned back in a tufted leather chair, wearing a bespoke charcoal blazer. Chase sat across from him, his posture loose and arrogant, wearing a designer watch that cost more than my first car. Next to Chase sat Jasmine. Her flawless dark skin glowed under the ambient lighting. Her box braids were gathered into an intricate high crown, and the emerald silk of her slip dress draped perfectly across her shoulders. I stood at the edge of the table. I wore the same black boots I wore to the job site, paired with dark denim and a simple gray sweater. I did not fit the aesthetic. David gestured to the empty chair beside Susan. You are late, Maya. Sit down. We already ordered the champagne. I took my seat. A waiter materialized instantly, pouring a pale golden liquid into a crystal flute in front of me. The bubbles rushed to the surface in a frantic line. David tapped his silver spoon against his glass. A sharp, high-pitched ring cut through the low murmur of the restaurant. He stood up slightly, raising his flute toward the center of the table. To family, David announced. His voice carried the practiced, booming cadence of a man used to running board meetings. And to the future. The Willow Street sale closes tomorrow at exactly 12 noon. The wire transfer hits by 3. Chase, Jasmine, your penthouse deposit is officially secured. Chase grinned and clinked his glass against his father's. Thanks, Dad. You have no idea how stressful the housing market is right now. The views from the 42nd floor are unreal. Jasmine already hired a design consultant. Jasmine smiled, running a manicured hand over her collarbone. We are going for a minimalist, ultra-modern aesthetic. Floor-to-ceiling windows, lots of natural light for my brand collaborations. The current space we rent is just too cramped for a real content creator. Susan beamed. She reached across the table and squeezed Chase's hand. You deserve it. Both of you deserve a space that reflects your ambition. Nobody looked at me. I sat at the edge of the circle, holding a glass of club soda. I watched the condensation drip down the side of the glass. $185,000 of my raw physical labor was currently paying for this toast. My blistered knees, my aching spine, my drained savings account. All of it had been converted into a penthouse deposit for an unemployed brother and a sister-in-law who complained about the smell of sawdust. The waiter returned bearing heavy silver trays. He placed a plate of seared scallops and black caviar in front of Jasmine. She picked up her heavy silver fork but paused, shifting her gaze across the table toward me. She studied my hands resting on the white tablecloth. Despite 2 rounds of scrubbing with industrial soap, a faint layer of gray drywall dust lingered in the creases of my knuckles. A fresh, red callus marked the center of my right palm from operating the orbital sander for 10 hours straight. "You really should book a spa day, Maya," Jasmine said. Her tone was coated in that specific brand of artificial sympathy reserved for the elite looking down at the working class. "All that manual labor is ruining your cuticles. You cannot find a decent man with hands that look like a bricklayer." Chase let out a short, sharp laugh around a mouthful of wine. "She is married to the hammer, Jazz. Let her build things. We actually need someone to fix the guest bathroom plumbing in the new penthouse once we move in." Susan offered a disapproving sigh, cutting into her steak. "Jasmine is making a valid point, Maya. Now that the house is finished, you need to focus on your personal life. You are 31. Hauling lumber is not a feminine look." David did not even look up from his plate. "It was a good hobby. It saved us a few thousand in contractor fees. But it is time you move on to something more suitable." A good hobby. Saved a few thousand. They were reducing 2 years of my blood and financial sacrifice into a cute weekend craft project. They were erasing my commercial license, my corporate entity, and my professional expertise right to my face, using it as a punchline over a $400 dinner. I did not grip the edge of the table. I did not raise my voice. I did not throw my drink in Chase's face. I picked up my wine glass. The deep red liquid swirled in a slow, steady circle. I looked at Jasmine's diamond stud earrings. I looked at Chase's smug, punchable grin. I looked at the man who promised me a deed and was now buying a luxury skyline view for his golden child. I took a slow, deliberate sip of the Bordeaux. It tasted like absolute victory. "I want to ask you a question. If your family sat across from you, raising their crystal glasses to celebrate the theft of your life savings, would you flip that table? Drop a 1 in the comments if you would scream the truth right there in the middle of the restaurant. Drop a 2 if you would choose to smile, sip your wine, and wait for the legal trap to spring. Let me know down below. Because sitting through that dinner was the ultimate test of restraint." "You are right," I said, setting the wine glass down gently on the linen. "The house is finished. The work is done. Tomorrow is going to be a very revealing day." Susan smiled, entirely blind to the weight of those words. "It will be a wonderful day." The main courses arrived: duck confit, Wagyu beef, truffle risotto. Chase leaned back, cutting into his meat with careless, jagged motions. "I was thinking about the staging for the living room," Chase said, pointing his knife at Jasmine. "We need a custom marble coffee table. The standard retail stuff looks cheap on camera." Jasmine nodded, dabbing the corner of her mouth with her napkin. "My followers expect a certain standard. I cannot film brand deals with budget furniture." "David, did the realtor say what time the funds clear tomorrow?" David swallowed his wine. "Escrow disperses funds by early afternoon. The buyer is bringing pure cash, so there is no bank underwriting delay. It is a clean transaction." A clean transaction. I pictured the yellow carbon copy receipt resting on my mahogany desk downtown. The county recorder seal pressed deep into the paper. The heavy, suffocating legal weight of a $185,000 encumbrance. "Did the buyers do their final walkthrough yet?" I asked. My voice was a flat, even line. Susan waved a hand dismissively. "They are doing it tomorrow morning at 8. It is just a formality. The house is flawless, Maya. You really did follow my design vision perfectly." Her design vision. I had drafted the architectural blueprints. I had pulled the municipal permits. I had rerouted the load-bearing walls. She had picked out a paint color from a hardware store catalog. It is flawless, I agreed. There will be no surprises with the physical house. Chase snorted. There better not be. I have a deposit on that marble table due by Friday. If this closing delays, I lose my allocation. Nothing is delaying, David stated. He signaled the waiter for the check. The title is clear. The contract is signed. Tomorrow, we drink the expensive champagne. The leather checkbook arrived on a silver tray. David pulled a heavy platinum credit card from his wallet and dropped it onto the bill. He looked at me, a brief flash of paternal superiority crossing his features. See, Maya, David said. Hard work pays off. You helped the family, and now the family is moving up. I stared at the platinum card. He was racking up high-interest debt tonight, banking on a payday that was already frozen solid in a county database. I stood up from the booth. I smoothed the front of my sweater. Thank you for dinner, I said. I have an early morning tomorrow. Commercial sites do not manage themselves. Jasmine rolled her eyes. Always working. You are going to age terribly if you do not relax. I will keep that in mind, Jasmine. Enjoy the penthouse. I walked out of the restaurant. The cool night air hit my face, clearing the stench of their delusion from my lungs. I did not look back through the glass windows. I handed my ticket to the valet and waited for my truck. The bait was taken. The predators were sleeping soundly. Tomorrow, the steel jaws would snap shut. The alarm on my phone flashed 5:30 in the morning. I was already awake. I lay in the dark, watching the streetlights cast long shadows across my bedroom ceiling. Today was closing day. In the real estate world, closing day carries a specific kind of electricity. It is the day keys change hands, wire transfers execute, and months of preparation culminate in a single stack of notarized documents. For my parents, today was their coronation. For me, it was the detonation sequence. My phone vibrated against the nightstand, a text message from David. Get over here right now. The buyers are doing their final walkthrough at 8. You left a mess in the garage. A mess. He was referring to my compound miter saw, my pneumatic nail guns, and the industrial air compressor I had used to build the custom shelving in his master closet. The equipment that had transformed his rotting asset into a $1 million listing was now an inconvenience. I did not reply to the text. I threw off the covers, pulled on a pair of heavy canvas work pants, and grabbed my boots. The drive to Willow Street was quiet. The sun had not yet crested the horizon, leaving the sky a bruised purple. Frost clung to the windshields of parked cars along the suburban roads. I pulled my truck into the driveway and shifted into park. The house looked pristine from the street. The exterior cedar siding I had spent 2 weekends replacing and staining gleamed under the porch lights. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The air conditioning was running, masking the lingering scent of fresh paint and wood sealant. David stood in the center of the living room foyer. He wore a crisp white dress shirt and slacks, holding a ceramic coffee mug. He checked his stainless steel watch as the door clicked shut behind me. David offered a warm, practiced smile. His tone dripped with that manufactured paternal affection he always used when he needed something for free. Maya, sweetheart, you made it, David said, stepping forward to pat my dust-covered shoulder. I know you are exhausted, but we are right at the finish line. The buyers will be here in less than 2 hours. I just need one last massive favor. Could you clear all your equipment out of the garage and give the concrete a quick sweep? I looked at him. He stood on the restored oak floors, a man waiting to collect a fortune he did not earn, playing the role of a loving father. The heavy equipment takes time to load alone, I said. David chuckled, a soft, dismissive sound. He gestured toward the hallway with his coffee mug. You are the strongest girl I know, Maya. Just power through this last little bit for the family. And sweetheart, please be super careful carrying those heavy tools out. We do not want to scratch this gorgeous hardwood you worked so hard on. Once this closing is done and Chase is settled, I promise I will take you out for a nice steak dinner to celebrate. He turned his back and walked toward the master suite, dismissing me entirely. He was worried about a scratch on the floor.
He had no idea the foundation of his entire transaction was already fractured. I walked into the kitchen. The morning light filtered through the large bay windows I had framed and installed last month. Susan stood at the quartz island. She wore a tailored beige cashmere sweater, holding a damp microfiber cloth. She was scrubbing at an invisible spot near the edge of the sink. "Morning, Maya," Susan said. She did not look up from her scrubbing. "There is a scuff mark here. I told you to lay down protective plastic when you were doing the final trim." "It is just a water spot, Mom. It wipes right off." She sighed, a dramatic, breathy sound meant to convey exhaustion. She tossed the cloth onto the counter and ran a hand over the wall next to the refrigerator. The wall was painted a specific shade of warm gray. I had spent 3 consecutive nights at the hardware store, mixing test batches, adjusting the tint by micro-ounces to achieve the exact neutral tone the real estate agent had recommended. "I still think this paint color was a mistake," Susan muttered, inspecting her fingernails. "It looks muddy in this light." "Jasmine said it feels very dated. We should have gone with a pure, stark white. The buyers are going to hate this undertone. I just hope it does not cost us at the closing table." I stood near the doorway, holding a heavy steel wrench I had picked up from the counter. I felt the cold metal press against my palm. She was criticizing the color I had bled to perfect, quoting the sister-in-law who had contributed nothing but complaints. "The buyers made a cash offer over asking price," I said, keeping my voice flat. "I think they like the paint." Susan offered a tight, condescending smile. "People buy location, Maya, not paint. Do not take credit for the market. Now please, go clean out the garage. Chase and Jasmine are meeting us at the title company at noon, and I do not want to be late." I turned and walked to the garage. The air inside the concrete space was freezing. My tools sat in neat piles along the back wall. This was the graveyard of my weekends. I backed my truck up to the open garage door and dropped the tailgate. I started with the air compressor. It weighed over 80 pounds. I squatted, gripped the metal handles, and hoisted it upward. My lower back screamed in protest. The muscles in my arms burned as I shuffled backward and heaved the compressor into the truck bed. The heavy thud echoed off the concrete walls. Next came the miter saw. Then the stacked toolboxes filled with drills, circular saws, and impact drivers. Every trip back and forth was a physical reminder of the labor they had stolen. I hauled bundles of heavy extension cords, industrial shop vacuums, and leftover boxes of ceramic tile. Sweat gathered at the base of my neck, despite the freezing temperature. My fingers were stiff and raw. I swept the garage floor with a stiff bristle broom, gathering the final remnants of drywall dust and sawdust into a dustpan. I threw the debris into the trash bin. I closed the tailgate. The heavy metal latch clicked into place. The physical work was finally over. The Willow Street house was empty of my presence. I climbed into the driver's seat of my truck and closed the door. The insulated cabin shut out the ambient noise of the neighborhood. I rested my forehead against the cold steering wheel. My lungs pulled in deep, slow breaths. My phone vibrated in the chest pocket of my canvas jacket. A sharp, singular buzz. I sat back and pulled the device out. The screen illuminated the dim cab. A text message from Marcus. "Title search initiated by escrow. The cloud has been flagged. The lien is active. The bank has halted the wire." I stared at the glowing letters. I read the words a second time, letting the syntax settle into my brain. The bank has halted the wire. In real estate, those words are a death sentence. The cash buyers had sent their funds to the escrow account, waiting for the title company to issue a clean insurance policy. The title company had pulled the final public records. They had found my mechanic's lien sitting right on top of the deed. The transaction was frozen. I looked through the windshield. Through the large front windows of the house, I could see David adjusting his collar in the hallway mirror. Susan was pacing the living room, holding her phone, likely checking the time, waiting for her wealthy buyers to arrive for the walkthrough. They were parading around their perfect house, dreaming of the penthouse deposit, anticipating a 7-figure wire transfer that was currently locked behind a steel vault of my making. The injustice that had choked me for 2 years dissolved. The resentment evaporated. In its place, a profound, chilling sense of control took root. They thought they had outsmarted a naive daughter. They had simply handed a loaded weapon to a commercial contractor. I put the truck in gear. I did not wave goodbye. I pulled out of the driveway and steered toward the highway. The sun finally broke over the tree line, casting a brilliant, blinding light across the road. The trap was sprung. The countdown to noon had begun. 2:00 in the afternoon. The heavy glass door of my corner office blocked out the ambient noise of the 14th floor. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the downtown commercial district. Yellow cabs moved in neat grids. Pedestrians walked with synchronized purpose. Everything outside operated on a strict system of rules, contracts, and consequences. My family had spent decades operating outside those boundaries, believing their internal hierarchy superseded reality. They thought blood gave them a free pass to exploit labor without consequence. Today, the real world was pushing back. I walked over to my mahogany desk and unrolled a set of commercial blueprints. The thick paper smelled of fresh printer ink. My silver drafting pen traced the steel support beams of a new retail center. I checked the digital clock in the corner of my monitor. 2:14. In the real estate industry, escrow offices operate on an unforgiving schedule. Wire transfers for major property sales typically execute by early afternoon. The machinery of $1 million transaction moves with a silent, predictable rhythm, provided the track is clear. My smartphone sat face up on the polished wood. The screen was black. Then it flared to life. A silent, sustained vibration rattled the device against a stack of business cards. The caller ID displayed, David. I did not reach for it. I kept my pen moving along the blueprint lines, checking a measurement against the legend. The ringing timed out. The screen went dark. 10 seconds later, it illuminated again. Susan. The vibration felt heavier this time, more insistent. I watched the call drop. A red notification bubble appeared on my screen. 2 missed calls. Then the digital counter began to climb with frantic speed. Chase tried next, then Jasmine, then David again. 3 missed calls, 7, 12, 15. The timestamps in the call log were separated by mere seconds. They were passing the panic around the room, taking turns dialing my number like a lifeline they had previously cut. The sheer volume of incoming calls painted a vivid picture of the chaos unfolding across town. I did not need to be in the room to see the structural collapse. I leaned back in my leather chair and pictured the scene at the title company. David would be wearing his bespoke charcoal blazer, sitting at a long oak conference table. Susan would have her pearls on, smiling her practiced country club smile. They had arrived expecting to sign a stack of routine documents, hand over the keys, and watch a 7-figure fortune land directly in their bank account. The cash buyers would have been sitting across from them, checkbooks ready. But the escrow officer, a professional trained to spot liabilities, had a job to do. Before releasing a single dollar, they are required to pull the final title commitment. They refresh the county public records database to ensure no last-minute claims have attached to the property. When that officer refreshed the screen today, a glaring red flag populated the ledger. A mechanic's lien. Claimant, my commercial construction entity. Debt amount, $185,000. The phone vibrated again. Call number 16. David. I set my drafting pen down. I pressed the green accept button and tapped the speaker icon. I let the phone rest flat on the desk, folding my hands over my lap. Maya. His voice was unrecognizable. The booming, authoritative tone he used to dictate family dinners and command respect was gone. It was replaced by a thin, reedy breathlessness. He sounded like a man who had just fallen down a flight of concrete stairs. "I am working, David," I said. My voice was a flat, even line. I held the steady cadence of a professional handling a minor vendor issue. "What did you do?" he gasped. Background noise bled heavily through the speaker. A chair scraped against a hard floor. Susan's muffled, frantic voice echoed in the distance, asking if I had finally answered.
We are sitting at the closing table. The escrow agent just stopped the signing. They said there is a cloud on the title. A debt. They said you filed a legal claim against the house. I filed a mechanics lien for unpaid labor and materials, I replied. It is standard industry procedure for delinquent accounts. You cannot do this! The panic in his voice spiked into a high register. The buyers are walking out of the room. Their agent is yelling at our agent. They are refusing to sign the final paperwork. The bank will not release the money. The bank is following the law, I stated. You attempted to sell an encumbered asset. The title is not clean. No sane buyer will take on a six-figure contractor debt. Chase yelled something in the background. His voice was shrill, lacking the smug drawl he carried around the French restaurant the night before. Tell her to drop it, Dad. Tell her to take it off right now. My penthouse deposit is tied to this. David covered the receiver, but the audio still leaked through the microphone. Shut up, Chase. Let me handle her. He came back to the line, attempting to lower his volume, trying desperately to find a negotiation angle. Maya, please, listen to reason. If you do not withdraw this claim right now, the entire deal dies. We lose the cash offer. Chase loses his new home. This is $1 million transaction. It is a transaction built on $185,000 of my stolen capital, I said, staring at the red timestamp tracking the call duration. I am a licensed commercial contractor. You hired me to renovate a property. You refused to compensate me for my materials and my time. You plan to use my sweat equity to buy your son a luxury apartment. The lien secures my investment. You are my daughter. It was a desperate plea, a last-ditch effort to use the familial bond he had discarded just hours ago. I am a creditor, I corrected him. And you are in default. The silence that followed those words was profound. It was the sound of a 30-year power dynamic shattering into pieces. He had never heard me speak this way. He was used to the quiet girl, the pack animal who accepted a $1,000 check with lowered eyes. He was not prepared to negotiate with a corporate director holding all the leverage. Susan snatched the phone. The polished hostess from the dinner table was gone. Her voice vibrated with genuine terror. Maya, you cannot do this to your own brother. Jasmine is hyperventilating in the lobby. She already ordered custom furniture for that penthouse. The holding fee is non-refundable. If we do not wire the funds by 3 p.m., they lose the apartment and the $50,000 deposit. They will be ruined. That sounds like a severe financial miscalculation on Chase's part, I replied. Signing a contract without liquid capital is poor business. He had the capital, Chase screamed from a few feet away. We had the house money. You had a projection of money, I corrected. You spent funds you did not legally possess. David wrestled the phone back from my mother. His breathing was heavy, ragged against the microphone. I will call the police. I will call the district attorney. I will tell them you are extorting us, that you forged these invoices. Extortion is demanding money you do not owe, I said, keeping my posture perfectly still. Filing a legal claim for documented construction materials is a protected right under state law, and forging invoices is a felony, which is why my lawyer holds the carbon copy receipts bearing your own signature, acknowledging material deliveries from 6 months ago. Call the police, David. Show them the lien. They will tell you it is a civil matter. They will tell you to pay your contractor. The buyers just left the building, Susan wailed in the background. Their agent said they are pulling their earnest money. You ruined it. You ruined everything. You ruined it the day you brought an appraiser into my workspace behind my back, I said. We are coming to your office, David shouted. The sound of a heavy door slamming shut echoed through the phone. Do not leave. We are coming downtown right now. You are going to sign whatever release form they need to fix this. I will be here, I said. I tapped the red button, ending the call. The line went dead, returning my office to its quiet, sterile hum. I picked up my silver drafting pen, found my place on the blueprint, and went back to work. 30 minutes after I ended the call,
the polished steel doors of the 14th floor elevator slid open. The quiet, sterile hum of my corporate headquarters shattered. Heavy, frantic footsteps slapped against the imported marble floor of the reception area. I stood behind the frosted glass wall of my office, watching the shadows of my family march toward the front desk. They brought the chaos of a residential driveway into a high-stakes commercial environment. Elena, my administrative assistant, stood up from behind her curved granite desk. "I need to see my daughter," David demanded. His voice echoed across the open floor plan. It was the same booming tone he used to command family dinners, but in this room, under the recessed architectural lighting, it sounded desperate and thin. "Tell Maya we are here right now." Elena did not flinch. She picked up her desk phone. She possessed the icy composure of someone who managed gatekeeping for a commercial firm. "Do you have an appointment, sir? The director is currently reviewing project bids." "I am her father," David snapped. He planted his hands on the granite counter. Susan stood right behind him, clutching her leather purse against her chest. Chase paced the length of the waiting area, running a hand through his hair, his designer watch flashing under the lights. Jasmine hovered near the elevator bank. Her flawless facade from the French restaurant had dissolved. Her silk blouse looked wrinkled. She kept checking her phone, refreshing the screen every 2 seconds. I opened my office door. The heavy glass glided on its steel track with a soft click. 4 heads snapped in my direction. They expected the girl in the dust-covered denim, the free laborer they could order to sweep a garage. Instead, they saw a woman in a tailored charcoal suit standing in the center of a multi-million-dollar operation. Junior architects and site managers paused at their cubicles, watching the scene unfold. "Elena, it is fine," I said. My voice carried across the lobby, smooth and even. "Show them to the executive boardroom." I did not wait for them to follow. I turned and walked down the main corridor. I heard the hesitant shuffle of their shoes behind me. The architecture of my office was designed to intimidate vendors and negotiate hostile contracts. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline. Long spans of exposed steel framed the glass walls. My family was stepping onto my battlefield, playing by my rules. I entered the boardroom and took the seat at the head of the long mahogany table. I placed a single object in the center of the wood surface. A black leather binder, 4 inches thick. David walked in first. He stopped at the edge of the table. He looked around the room, taking in the leather chairs, the digital presentation screens, and the sheer scale of the space. The realization hit him. The illusion he harbored about my career cracked. "Sit," I instructed. Nobody sat. Chase slammed both hands onto the back of a leather chair. "Take it off," Chase demanded. His face was flushed red, sweat shining at his temples. "Call the title company right now and remove that lien." "You are ruining my life." "I am securing my corporate assets," I replied, leaning back in my chair. David stepped forward, attempting to reclaim his authority. "You are extorting your own family. You snuck behind our backs and filed a fraudulent claim." "I spoke to our real estate agent on the drive over here. She said we can sue you for damages." I reached forward and flipped open the heavy cover of the black binder. The sound of thick paper turning echoed in the quiet room. "Let us review the fraud," I said. My tone remained surgical. I turned to the first section, marked with a yellow plastic tab. February 12th. 3 pallets of premium-grade concrete, billed to my corporate account, delivered to the Willow Street address, signed for by you, David. I slid the original carbon copy invoice across the polished mahogany. It stopped inches from his hands. His signature sat on the bottom line in blue ink. I turned to the blue tab. April 4th. Custom white oak flooring. $18,000, paid via my commercial credit line. Here is the supplier receipt. Here is the freight delivery confirmation. I slid the second document across the table. I turned to the red tab. Municipal building permits, electrical inspection fees, plumbing overhauls, every single piece of copper wire, every gallon of paint, every hour of licensed commercial labor, tabulated, indexed, and legally recorded. I flipped to a single page protected by a heavy plastic sleeve. "And this," I said, tapping the smooth surface, "is the notice of furnishing you signed on day 1, tucked right beneath your permit applications. It legally secured my right to encumber this property the second you defaulted." David stared at the papers. His jaw worked, but no sound came out. The booming patriarch was suffocating under the weight of an ironclad paper trail. "In the state of Ohio," I continued, keeping my eyes locked on his, "when a licensed contractor improves a property and the owner refuses to pay, it constitutes a legal concept called unjust enrichment. You cannot increase the value of your asset by $185,000 using stolen labor and materials. The law does not allow you to feast on my bank account." Susan stepped forward, her voice trembling, attempting the emotional angle. "Maya, please, we are your parents. We gave you a roof over your head for 18 years. You owe us this. This house was our retirement." "You promised me the deed, Mom. You sat at your dining room table and shook my hand. Then you brought an appraiser into my workspace while I was installing your cabinets. You listed the property on a pocket network. You planned to steal my money and hand it to Chase." Chase let out a sharp, desperate noise. He looked at his phone. The digital clock on the wall above the presentation screen flipped to 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock. The wire transfer deadline. Jasmine let out a low, ragged gasp. Her phone slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the mahogany table. The screen displayed a text message from their luxury real estate broker. The words were large and unmistakable. "Deposit forfeited. Contract terminated." "No," Jasmine whispered. She gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles turning white. The curated influencer mask shattered, leaving behind raw, unfiltered panic. She looked at Chase, her eyes wide with terror. "Chase, the money! Where is the money? We owe the design firm. We owe the staging company. You said the wire was guaranteed." Chase backed away from the table, his breathing shallow and rapid. "Maya, you have to fix this. Call the bank. Tell them you made a mistake. Tell them it is a family dispute." "The bank does not care about family disputes," I said. "The title company cares about clear ownership. The property has a cloud on it. Escrow is dead." Jasmine broke. The woman who had sneered at my dirty fingernails, who had told me to find a man because manual labor was ruining my cuticles, crumbled in the center of my boardroom. Tears ruined her perfect makeup. She leaned over the table, her voice raw and begging. "Please, Maya. I am begging you. We will lose everything. Chase promised me that apartment. We put everything on credit cards waiting for this house sale. You cannot do this to us. Just lift the lien so the buyers can sign." I watched her cry. I felt no pity. I felt no satisfaction. I felt the cold, hard reality of a ledger balancing itself to zero. "I did not put you in debt, Jasmine," I said. "Chase put you in debt. He signed a contract with invisible money." David slammed his fist onto the table. The coffee cups rattled. "You will sign a release form today, Maya. I will not let you destroy your brother's future over a carpentry bill." The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. I stood up. I did not raise my voice, but the sharpness of my words cut through the air like a razor. Family is not an excuse for fraud. You did not hire a weekend handyman. You hired the director of commercial construction. You signed for the materials. You requested the labor. You generated a 6-figure invoice. I closed the heavy binder. The loud thud silenced the room. "You have to pay your debts, David," I stated, staring directly into my father's panicked eyes. "If you do not pay me the $185,000 you owe me, plus the legal filing fees, that lien stays anchored to the foundation, and that house will never be sold." I turned my back on them. I walked out of the boardroom, leaving my parents and my brother standing in the wreckage of their own greed. I did not look over my shoulder as the glass door sealed them inside. The execution was complete. The morning after the boardroom meeting brought the first wave of collateral damage. Marcus walked into my office carrying a single sheet of printed paper. He placed it squarely over my keyboard. It was a digital copy of a civil filing from the county courthouse. The cash buyers were not the forgiving type. They did not simply retrieve their funds from escrow and quietly search for another piece of real estate. They filed a lawsuit against David and Susan for breach of contract. The purchase agreement explicitly required the sellers to deliver a clean title by noon on closing day. My parents failed to perform. The buyers demanded the immediate return of their earnest money. They also demanded $12,000 in damages to cover their wasted appraisal fees, property inspections, and attorney retainers. The $1 million payday evaporated. It transformed into a costly legal nightmare before the sun even set. By Friday afternoon, the shockwave reached the downtown skyline. Chase had a hard deadline with his penthouse developer, 5 o'clock. Without the wire transfer from our parents, his purchase contract expired. The developer triggered the default clause without hesitation. Chase lost his allocation for the 42nd floor view. More importantly, he forfeited the $50,000 holding deposit. It was a non-refundable clause buried in the fine print he never bothered to read. He did not possess $50,000 in liquid cash. He had patched that deposit together using high-limit credit cards and short-term personal loans, floating the debt on the absolute certainty that David would hand him the house profits. Now, the debt was a concrete reality, and the bailout was dead. Saturday night, my phone vibrated on the kitchen counter. I was drinking a glass of ice water, watching the city traffic move through the intersection below my apartment window. The caller ID displayed my brother's name. I pressed the green accept button and placed the device on speaker. I did not offer a greeting. The background noise painted a vivid picture of a structural collapse, drawers sliding open and slamming shut against wooden frames, the metallic clink of coat hangers hitting the floor. "Maya," Chase said. His voice lacked the arrogant drawl he carried around the French restaurant. He sounded breathless, his words slurring slightly, thick with panic. "You have to wire me $50,000, right now, just as a short-term loan. I will pay you back with interest." I listened to the frantic rustling on his end. "You do not have the income to generate interest, Chase." "Jasmine is leaving," he blurted out. The panic in his chest broke through the speaker audio. "She called a black car. She is packing her bags." I heard the sharp, distinct sound of a heavy brass zipper closing. Jasmine did not yell. She did not throw ceramic plates or stage a dramatic weeping session for an audience. She operated on pure, calculating self-interest. She had married the illusion of generational wealth. The second that ticket dissolved, exposing a man drowning in unsecured consumer debt with a retail job resume, her loyalty evaporated. "Tell her I will get the money," Chase pleaded. His voice shifted away from the receiver as he chased his wife down the hallway. "Jazz, wait! The car's not downstairs yet. My sister's on the phone. She's going to fix this." A wooden door opened. "I am not missing my flight to Atlanta," Jasmine stated. Her tone was smooth, polished, and devoid of any affection. "You played a good game, Chase. Good luck with your credit score." The heavy slam of the apartment door echoed through the phone. Chase let out a ragged, pathetic sound. He dropped the device. I heard it clatter against the hardwood floor, sliding under a piece of furniture. I tapped the red button, severing the connection. The quiet in my kitchen returned, steady and calm. My parents spent the next 2 weeks attempting to find an exit strategy. They relisted the house on the public market. They hired a new real estate agent, promising a quick, seamless close. It was a futile exercise in optics. A mechanic's lien is a public beacon. Every time a prospective buyer showed interest, their respective title companies ran a standard background search. The $185,000 encumbrance flashed like a warning siren. 3 separate offers vanished during the preliminary checks. The financial pressure mounted with surgical precision. David and Susan were floating 2 households. They had to pay the property taxes, utility bills, and maintenance costs on an empty, renovated house they could not legally sell, while maintaining the heavy overhead on their own primary residence. The bank holding their original, smaller mortgage began sending delinquency notices in red envelopes. They were bleeding cash, trapped in a cage they built with their own hands. They tried to fight the lien in court.
David hired a discount attorney from a neighboring county. The man filed a motion to dismiss my claim, arguing the labor was a familial favor and the invoices were fabricated. Marcus responded by burying the judge in a mountain of corporate documentation. The signed delivery receipts, the itemized material invoices, the state contractor licensing codes. The judge threw out David's motion in under 10 minutes. He then ordered my father to pay Marcus's court appearance fees. The reality of their situation finally crushed their pride. They had $1 million asset decaying in a volatile market, and they could not extract a single dime until my signature touched a release of lien document. On a rainy Tuesday morning, 14 days after the frozen escrow, Marcus walked into my office. He did not hold a legal threat this time. He held a small rectangular slip of paper. "They secured a hard money loan," Marcus said, taking a seat across from my desk. I looked up from my monitor. A hard money loan, in 14 days, with an active lawsuit pending against them. Marcus nodded, a grim smile touching his lips. Traditional banks laughed them out of the lobby. They had to go to a predatory private equity lender. The underwriter only approved the rush funding because your parents were desperate enough to cross-collateralize. They put up their primary residence and whatever equity they had left in the Willow Street house. 18% interest, plus 5 points up front just to close the deal. A brutal, suffocating repayment schedule. They were taking on high-interest predatory debt just to escape the trap. They mortgaged their own safe harbor to pay for the crime they committed at Willow Street. Marcus slid the rectangular paper across the mahogany surface. It was a certified cashier's check, drawn from the private lender's escrow account, made payable directly to my commercial construction firm. I looked at the printed numbers, $200,000 exactly. The original $185,000 for the labor and materials, plus $15,000 to cover every hour Marcus spent drafting the lien, defending the motion, and corresponding with their frantic attorney. They paid for the trap, and then they paid for the steel teeth that bit them. Marcus placed a single document next to the check, the release of lien. "Once you sign this, the county recorder will strike the encumbrance from the public record," Marcus explained. "The Willow Street title will clear. They can sell the house." I picked up my heavy black pen. I did not feel a sudden rush of vindication. I did not feel the urge to call them and gloat. The punishment was already administered by the cold, mechanical gears of the American legal and financial systems. Chase was living in an empty apartment, drowning in credit card debt, stripped of his fake influencer wife. David and Susan were shackled to a predatory loan, their reputation in the real estate community shattered, forced to sell the house at a steep discount to cover their new mounting liabilities. I pressed the pen to the paper. I signed my name with fluid, sharp strokes. The ink dried in seconds. The transaction was complete. The ink dried on the release form. By Friday morning, the $200,000 cleared the automated clearinghouse network and landed in my corporate operating account. I sat at my desk and watched the digital ledger update. It was not a lottery prize. It was restitution. It represented the exact value of my physical labor, the premium materials I sourced, and the legal penalty for attempting to steal both. I closed the banking portal. The Willow Street house was no longer my concern. My parents were free to sell it to the highest bidder, assuming they could find a buyer willing to pay enough to cover their predatory loan. That was a math equation they would have to solve on their own. I picked up my smartphone, the screen illuminated, displaying 4 new text messages stacked in a neat row. 2 were from David. He demanded I call him to negotiate a repayment plan for the legal fees he incurred fighting my lien. 1 was from Susan. She wrote a guilt-laden paragraph detailing how her blood pressure had spiked and how the stress was affecting her health. She wanted to know how a daughter could cause her mother so much physical pain. The final message was from Chase. He asked if I could wire him $1,000 to cover his car payment because his credit cards were maxed out. I read the words. I did not type a reply. A response is a transaction, an exchange of energy they no longer possess the currency to afford. Any explanation or argument would only feed their delusion that we were still negotiating. We were not.
The contract was terminated. I opened my contacts list. I tapped my father's name.
I scrolled to the bottom of the profile and selected Block Caller. I tapped my mother's name. Block Caller. I tapped my brother's name. Block Caller. The screen went blank. The silence that followed in my office was heavy, clean, and permanent. Word travels fast when a structural collapse happens in public. Without our father's wallet or his wife's curated aesthetic, Chase collided with reality. He now works a cash register at a wholesale supermarket, pushing metal carts across hot asphalt to chip away at his massive debt. The real world required a time card. David and Susan faced their own reckoning. To clear their predatory loan, they had to sell the Willow Street masterpiece at a brutal loss. The $1 million payday dissolved, forcing them out of their sprawling suburban home and into a cramped 2-bedroom apartment near an industrial park. They were now living the exact marginalized life they had tried to assign to me. I took my $200,000 and routed it into a personal trust fund. I drove 40 minutes north of the city limits and bought 5 acres of raw, uncleared timber in pure cash. I sat in my corner office downtown and drafted the blueprints myself. I hired a crew of skilled union carpenters, paying them their full hourly rate, on time, every Friday. I stood in the dirt and watched my timber framing rise. Every nail driven into the wood belonged to me. Every inch of drywall was paid for honestly. 6 months later, the house was finished. I sat on my new porch early on a Sunday morning, wearing a heavy canvas jacket and holding a ceramic mug of black coffee. There were no ringing phones. There were no demands for free labor. The isolation was not lonely. It was a fortress. I took a slow sip of the dark roast and watched the sun break over the canopy of trees. The best revenge is not destroying your enemies. The best revenge is forcing them to pay the exact price of what they tried to steal, and then leaving them to survive in the rubble of their own making. Blood makes you related, but self-respect is the only thing that keeps you alive. If you have ever had to choose between keeping a false peace and protecting your own dignity, let me know your survival story in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe to Sweet Life Drama if you want to hear more stories about people who stopped being disposable victims and started holding the people who hurt them legally and financially accountable. I will see you in the next video.